Okay, Kylie, so what do you have for us today?
Today, I will be talking about the Pokemon franchise. Pokemon, if you don't know, which you should, but if you don't know, it's a show, it's a card game, it's a video game, it's movies, and there's so much more to the brand. Pokemon took the world by storm in the late 90s. Boys and girls alike sat around after school to watch the cartoon while collecting trading cards and battling them against each other. Pokemon was and is a universe that allows everyone to step in the shoes of a Pokemon trainer, which makes it fascinating and it creates fans for life. So, we're going to dive into that today. My resources are Wikipedia, Alter Gaming, Genius, and IGN. So, how did the world of Pokemon come to be? It started with a man by the name of Satoshi Tajiri, born in 1965. He grew up in Machida, Japan, a small suburb of Tokyo, very rural. It was, outdoors. He just was always outside playing as people did back in the good old days. As a young boy, Satoshi enjoyed being out in nature like most kids, and he liked to catch insects. So much so that his friends called him Dr. Bug. And he actually had dreams of becoming an entomologist, which, for those of you who don't know, that's someone who studies insects. I only know that because one of my college professors was an entomologist. But as he grew older, technology continued to develop, and as we all know, Tokyo became a huge industrial city. So Machida lost its rural sense and technology was taking over. Naturally, Satoshi developed an interest in technology, specifically video games. As a teenager, Satoshi was fully interested in video games. And with Japanese parents, naturally, they weren't happy about this, as it's a huge distraction from his studies. Satoshi would spend hours in the arcades playing video games. He started young at working on video games. One of his favorite games was Space Invaders, and he began studying it and many of the knockoff versions of it as well. He wanted to make his own version of a sequel to Space Invaders. So he was not only into playing them, he wanted to create them. He would often cut class, but he ended up getting his act together so he could get a high school diploma. He did not go on to attending a university. However, he did attend Tokyo National College of Technology, where he received a technical degree, which honestly, good for him. I'm just going to go on a side rant really quick. If we have younger folks listening to this, sorry parents, but technical schools are the way to go. Obviously, if you want to be like a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, yeah, you need college, but look into technical schools because they can save you so much money, give you the skills you need quickly so that you can just get into what you do. Let me get off my soapbox here and we'll get back to Satoshi. So some of Satoshi other accomplishments from a young age include him entering a contest hosted by Sega where his idea for a video game won. He also pulled apart his Famicom, which, if you don't know, that is what they're called in Japan, but it's the Nintendo Entertainment System here in America. So the good old Nintendo we all had as kids. He just wanted to see how it worked, so he just pulled it apart. And his dream was to create a video game where kids could get the same feeling he would get when he would catch bugs as a child. With his love of video games, Satoshi ended up creating his own fanzine, which I didn't know this. It's a non-professional and non-official publication. So he called his fanzine Game Freak. And if you've ever played any of the Pokemon video games, you know this is the first thing you see when you switch on your Game Boy. It says Game Freak on it. So you can see what direction we're heading in here. He ended up partnering with a man named Ken Sugimori, who became the illustrator for the fanzine. And the fanzine went from 1981 to 1986. It would provide readers with tips on how to win games, and it would also talk about Easter eggs they can look for in these games. So it was a pretty fun publication to read. The fanzine had a pretty large readership, with its most popular issue selling 10,000 copies.
Wow.
As time went on, Game Freak grew and had many contributors to the team. Satoshi and Ken realized something, that most video games out there lack quality. And the way to fix this was to start creating their own. So they got into studying and developing the first arcade game. Quinty was the name of that. And they actually pitched it to Namco, which is another video game company, and they sold their game to them. So pretty
Nice.
impressive here so far. In 1989, Game Freak went from being a fanzine to a full-fledged video game company. And when Satoshi first saw the Game Boy in 1989 that had the port link that connects two consoles together, his mind was blown. And his childhood dream came back to his mind as he envisioned bugs crawling back and forth between the consoles. With that, in 1990, Pokemon was conceived. So
Wow.
now Satoshi has built quite a resume at this point with Sega, Namco. He's already got some great features on his resume. And on top of that, he has a popular magazine. So when he approached Nintendo about this Pokemon concept, they really couldn't grasp the concept, but knowing his reputation, they decided to explore it. And it's a good thing they did, but in the beginning, it did not seem that way. Through the Nintendo roots, Satoshi meets a gentleman by the name of Ishihara, who became the producer of Pokemon, while Satoshi was the director. So Ishihara was more in charge of the budget, the work schedule, debugging the game, and he also contributed ideas. Meanwhile, Satoshi made sure things were happening on time and kind of managing the tasks that were all going to be put together to make this game. And don't think I forgot about Ken from Game Freak. Ken was in charge of character development because he's the illustrator here. And then he also handled the graphics of the game because, duh. It took 6 years for Game Freak to complete the first Pokemon video game, Pokemon Red and Green. It actually nearly bankrupted the company, and they could barely afford to pay their employees.
Dang.
So we had rough beginnings here. 5 employees ended up quitting, and Satoshi, being a true video game nerd, decided to not take a salary, and he lived off his father's income instead. So for once, the living off your parents' basement story turns out to be a fairy tale. So Game Freak did end up receiving some help when Creatures Inc. invested in the Pokemon franchise for 1/3 of the rights. So Pokemon was owned by Nintendo, Game Freak, and Creatures Inc.
Oh, wow.
So we had three ways here. And if it weren't for these three companies, we wouldn't have Pokemon. So during the creation of the first Pokemon game, Satoshi also helped with the creation of other video games. He helped with Pulseman for Sega, or Pulseman is probably how that's pronounced. And he also helped with 2 Mario spin-off games, Yoshi, and a Japanese-only version of a game called Mario and Wario. And when those Mario games were released for the Game Boy, they actually didn't do well. And it was kind of thought that the days of the Game Boy were over and it was becoming obsolete. But we've been working so hard and have given up basically everything we have for Pokemon to be on the Game Boy. So what's going to happen? So in 1996, Pokemon was released. Pokemon is a shortened abbreviation for Poketo Monstera, or in English, Pocket Monster. So if you've ever wondered where they got the word Pokemon, now you know.
What a fun
In the
fact.
there right? I thought so too. In the first launch, there were 150 Pokemon creatures, and this game was designed for players to explore and find Pokemon, battle Pokemon, and even trade Pokemon with each other. Satoshi also wanted to tame down violence in this game. Now, I know what you're thinking. This game is about fighting. How is that not violent? Well, in most video games, when you lose, it's illustrated as you dying, right? So Satoshi didn't like associating dying with losing the game. So instead of Pokemon dying when they lose a battle, they just faint. And then you can take them to the Pokemon Center to be healed. So I thought that was fascinating. The game was not expected to do well with the downfall of the Game Boy sales, but to everyone's surprise, sales continued to climb steadily, and it quickly grew to become one of Nintendo's top franchises. Now, with there being 3 companies invested, normally you need to run things by everyone. However, there was a detail of this game Nintendo was not made aware of. Rumors started swirling about this bonus Pokemon named Mew hiding in the game, and this turned out to be true. But it actually made sales improve. So while Nintendo was not necessarily given the chance to, give this the green light or the red light, it ended up being a good thing that helped them greatly. Another phenomenon was a Pokemon in specific, Pikachu. Pikachu is an electric Pokemon with powers like Thunderbolt, Thundershock, and Quick Attack. Pikachu is known to be the face of Pokemon and honestly is a global icon. I mean, back then, even parents knew who Pikachu was. I feel like everyone knows who Pikachu is now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for sure.
In 1998, Pokemon began making its international debut and took the world by storm. This time was known as Pokemania, and to accentuate the Pokemon video games, a manga, and anime cartoon followed, alongside a trading card game. So the anime follows a 10-year-old boy, Ash Ketchum, who begins his journey as a Pokemon trainer, following his dream to become a Pokemon master. And with the help of his mentor, Professor Oak, he is matched with his first Pokemon, Pikachu, and he, along the way, meets his 2 best friends, Brock and Misty. And the show gives the story of a hero's journey, while the video games and the trading card games allow fans to step into the hero's journey. And the show also included an interactive game during commercial breaks, as they would show a silhouette of a mystery Pokemon before the break, asking, "Who's that Pokemon?" And then they would conclude the break with the reveal. And the show also had an epic start with their theme song that is known by every 90s kid and would end with the Poke Rap, where they would name the 151 Pokemon. Did you watch this cartoon, Amber?
Like a little bit here and there. I would see it with like my cousins and
Okay.
stuff, but not like regularly. What about you?
Okay. Yeah, I did for a little bit. I know my brother and I, that's probably the only 30 minutes we would actually hang out together was to watch Pokemon after school. I feel like everyone's at least seen it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, the more interaction I got was actually with the card game. A lot of people in my school played the card game,
Okay.
so I saw that more so than the show.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to dive into that. But first, we're going to get into the video games, which were released in the US as Pokemon Red, Pokemon Blue, and Pokemon Yellow to start. And each game offered a different experience. The games had different Pokemon in the games, and some were located in different places as well. So in Red and Blue, you get to choose one of 3 Pokemon. You can do Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur. So Charmander's a fire Pokemon, Squirtle's a water Pokemon, and Bulbasaur is a grass Pokemon. In Yellow, you don't get a choice, and Pikachu is the automatic Pokemon given to you by Professor Oak. Personally, I don't like having Pikachu around because he follows you outside of his Pokeball. And if he's sick or whatever, like you have to hear him whining. And I don't know. I love me a quiet Pokemon. So if I play Yellow, I'll usually go find my Charmander ASAP and then deposit Pikachu away. Sorry for those Pikachu fans out there. Another difference in the yellow is there is a bonus Pikachu surfing game, which is pretty fun. But the
Nice.
game allows you to live your own journey from becoming a Pokemon trainer and collecting Pokemon. And you begin in your hometown of Pallet Town and say bye to your mother. Then go visit Professor Oak, get your Pokemon, and have your first battle against your biggest rival, Gary, who is Professor Oak's grandson. So we're following the show here. And then you move town to town, battling, catching, and training your Pokemon, battling fellow trainers in Pokemon gyms, which will earn you badges. And then you eventually get to fight the League. I've beaten these games a handful of times. It's great. Have you ever played the video games?
No, I never really played these video games, so this is all foreign to me. So this is cool to listen to how it's
Okay.
played.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Next time we are together, I'll make sure to have my Game Boy with me with the game so you can at least experience it once.
Nice.
Now we'll get to the trading cards. We'll get back into the worlds you're familiar with.
Yeah.
So the trading card game was inspired by another trading card game, Magic the Gathering. How this would work was you would either buy a card or a pack of cards and you would battle the cards against each other. Basically, whichever card was stronger would defeat the other. I unfortunately didn't have enough time to study how exactly to play it, but whoever had the strongest card based on points and powers and whatnot, my brother and I would just make up our own rules, and he very well may have just made things up, so he would have won, and I would never know. But yeah. So while these weren't the first trading cards for a battle game, they were the first that most 90 kids were exposed to because not many people are familiar with Magic the Gathering.
Hmm.
And they really exploded in the toy industry. Like they were everywhere. You had them in toy stores, big box department stores like Target and Walmart. They were in prize counters at arcades, even. And GameStop and collectible stores also had them as well. Back in the day, we had these things called malls, and they would have a bunch of little things called stores where you could go buy things in person. So these cards were just about everywhere you could think of when you wanted them. If you were really into Pokemon and the trading card game, this was an entire community for you in itself. Many toy and collectible stores would host Pokemon tournaments on the weekends, and kids would come in on Saturday mornings with their card collections and battle each other. I couldn't tell you if there was a prize, but it really didn't matter. It was just something for kids to do, and they'd meet kids with similar interests. So, Pokemon really was a culture. And these cards not only were widespread all over the retail industry, but they inspired a handful of copycat franchises that came to follow with shows, video games, and trading card games. The most notable franchises were Digimon and Yu Gi Oh! These were mainly followed by boys. And Pokemon had fan bases with boys, but they had a good handful of girls too, at least to a certain extent, myself
Hmm.
included. However, while those franchises aren't as big as today as they were back then, Pokemon still lives strong and has never really gone away. The fans of Pokemon never have really outgrown it. Pokemon has kept it mainstream in many ways, and in more recent years, the franchise has attracted its now adult audience with a feature film, Detective Pikachu, starring Ryan Reynolds and Justice Smith. And they also released an app, Pokemon Go. This had a moment. Do you remember the days of Pokemon Go?
Oh my God, what a blissful summer that was.
Did you play it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, everyone was into it. This
Oh,
was
you did?
when what year was this? Was it 2014? What year
No,
did it
it
get
was
released?
like 2016, I
Was it
think.
16? Okay, yeah. So I was still living in my
Yeah.
college town and we had all kind of graduated, but we were all still there. And so like me and my friends, we would go like after work, we would go to the park and we would walk, aka go try to catch Pokemon for like 3 hours.
Yep, I remember that happening.
Such a
This
great
game
time.
took over the world. Yeah, it really took over the world for like a good year or so.
It did. I remember. because I never really, like I said, I don't have much experience with Pokemon, but this was like a way for people who didn't really have experience or like any understanding to kind of be a part of this culture that everyone had been about for so long. So I felt included.
Yeah. And I really think like anybody can be involved in Pokemon, and maybe that's why I liked it, because you can jump in at
Hmm.
any point and just, it's kind of accepting for everyone. It's really easy to catch on to who's who and what's what.
Yeah.
So, but you make a good point there. Yeah, I can proudly say I rebelled against this game, but for a while people were just on it nonstop, like you said. Like for me though, it was kind of creepy to witness.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah.
for those who don't know what we're talking about, this game allowed you to catch Pokemon. Um, like it was like in the video games, but this was real life. So there's like some sort of advanced form of technology for sure. So you'd get the app and you would just like and you'd like scan the camera around your like
Area.
the world, like, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, where you're at physically in the real world. You would just put your camera around in the app and there would be like Pokemon around to catch. And there was like exclusivity to it too. Like some Pokemon were available at this park and you could get, I remember they had, uh, was it Machop, which is like a muscular Pokemon, and he was at a gym specifically in my town. So you'd have to go to that gym to get him.
Oh my God, that's so
But yeah,
funny.
they just would have him. Yeah, it was wild. And it got people out more and they were walking. Like you said, you were walking for 3 hours.
Hmm.
But what I noticed is people weren't paying attention to where they were going. So, like, I remember I was at my apartment and I was in the parking lot and I had parked to go inside and I noticed this guy wandering into traffic in the parking lot. And I can see he's on his phone. His eyes are not being lifted up from his phone. And I watched him for like a good 5 minutes and he did not look up from his phone once. So, like, seeing
That's
that,
scary.
I was determined. Yeah, like you could trip over a curb, you could get hit by a car, you could run into a pole. Like, I don't, you could cause damage to somebody's vehicle and be responsible.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I told myself I was never getting it after seeing that. But it definitely gave some laughs. Like there's that story. And then I remember one time I was at work, one of my supervisors was playing it and she scanned it over my male supervisor's pants.
Hmm.
Um, Not on purpose. She was just moving her camera around and found the Pokemon and um I'll describe my male supervisor before I let you know what was on his pants. So he was Mormon, very conservative, very sweet, but very shy guy. Okay. So he found a Weedle on his pants. So if you don't know what a Weedle is, it's like a worm caterpillar thing. So it's like right there on his pants. So she got a great laugh and he was very awkward. Looking back, that was probably inappropriate for him to experience that, but technically technology did that.
That wasn't her fault. Uh,
But yeah. Today Pokemon still live strong, known and adored by many generations, and probably gonna live on forever.
Nice. That's crazy. No, honestly, I think Pokemon Go really revamped it for like not only us, but I think like a new generation too.
Oh
And
yeah.
isn't Pokemon Go is still going strong, right? Like if I'm not wrong.
I have no idea, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear people are still playing it.
Yeah. No, I just remember people walking like, on top of the walking around everywhere aimlessly where we weren't looking at each other, we're looking at our phones. But battery packs, that was when the power banks were so crucial because the way that the app worked with the camera and your Wi-Fi, like it drained your battery so quickly that like you had to have an extra source to like charge your phone because it would take your battery so quick. Fun
That's
fact about that.
wild. I had no idea.
Oh, it was such a
So
good time.
what are you talking about? You are a full-on Pokemon trainer.
I played for a little bit, but the thing is, to be fair, like I didn't play the way people wanted me to. Like I've never been a big fighter game type of girly, so like I didn't really fight my Pokemon that often. I was just in it to catch the Pokemon. I always fucking caught Butterfree or Butterflee or whatever that one was.
Oh,
That was the one I kept catching.
Butterfree, and then Caterpie was what evolved into Butterfree.
Well, I was already pissed because I'm like, butterflies, get out of here. Why do I keep catching you? Um
You're right. For the folks at home, Amber has struggles with butterflies. They literally attack her while she's
they
out
do.
walking.
Oh my God, it's starting again too, because it's a little bit warm right now. So, which is weird, by the way. It's like late December. It should be cold. It's been like 80 degrees here, and they've just been. It's this one corner that I turn. I don't know why they're so aggressive, but like when I turn this corner, they're all like already kind of fighting with each other, and then they come at me, and I'm like, okay, I don't think it's about me.
They are violent. Violent
So
butterflies in California.
that's what I'm saying. And this is a nice neighborhood, a quiet neighborhood, so it's not like there's any aggression going on here. It's all old people. So I don't get it. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's my energy coming in. They're like, the old people are tame. It's gotta be me.